Good evening from Swansea, wrestling fans. I'm your host, Ben Allison, and I've been away for a couple of days. I'm back now. I'm a year old. I'm now officially 22. I've also had an absolute hit of a song come out as well in the last couple of days. They now call me the next Kendrick Lamar. Taylor Swift is messaging me, asking me for advice when it comes to songwriting. I mean, rapper Ben is just, it was a smash hit. What can I say? I mean, if you haven't checked it out yet, they bring the views. I think could be Christmas #1. But also joining me today, we have Clark Taylor. How are you today, Clark?
I am excited to be here. I'm trying to get my camera angle straight. I apologize. Been in a bit of a scramble all day, but I'm stoked about it. It's Thanksgiving week here in the good old US of A. And more importantly, the Jayhawks beat Duke last night, so I have nothing to complain about on this fine Wednesday. I'm stoked. Let's get into it, Ben.
Absolutely. Also joining us today to talk about this entire Ricky Stark situation, AEW's partnership, lack thereof, with GCW, AEW Grand Slam being moved from a stadium to an arena, and the new Women's Intercontinental Championship. We have the head of opinions here at Wrestling Republic. How are you today, Anthony?
Doing all right. It's great to be on the show yet again. And my first daily of the week, and it is like you said, it's a stacked deck that we're going to be discussing, and I can't wait to get into it.
Absolutely, it should be a fun show. That is for sure. And let's just jump headfirst into this Ricky Stark situation, shall we? Because in case you guys haven't seen it, Ricky Stark sat down for an interview with Chris Van Vliet this week, where he said he's not been injured this past year. He has no idea why he's not been used. But what he does know is when he went to WrestleMania, I think it was the Royal Rumble, somebody in AEW said to him, hey, that's a bad luck if you go to those. Despite the fact that several other AEW stars were there, and Tony Khan previously said that it was not an issue. Basically, he did this big interview. He had no idea why he's not being used. He's very clearly quite annoyed about it. He's saying his prime years are being wasted, and it's understandable as well from his perspective that he was then scheduled for a few independent appearances, and then those have now been cancelled. Now, the reported reasons, this isn't a fact, this is a report, this is dirt sheet reporting by Fightful Select, is that the reason he was pulled from those GCW appearances was because of what Effie said on a podcast recently. And of course, Effie, he's a talent for GCW, and he said some things about Tony Khan and his father. Quite stupid, but that has resulted in Ricky Starks being pulled from those events. So now poor Ricky, he's still sitting at home, and he still has absolutely no idea what's going on in his prime years. His contract's up sometime next year. He's still under contract for a while yet. Clark, what's your thoughts on this entire situation? Because it just seems crazy to me.
I mean, it's a funky one. Yeah, you want to believe that somehow this is like an accident, and it's not. It's weird. The fact that he's now confirmed not injured, the fact that there's all this other speculation as far as what Effie has said, the GCW dates, where is Ricky been, what's going on, obviously his relationship with Cody Rhodes showing up, as he mentioned, the Rumble, all of these things adding on top of each other, it just seems like a difficult spot. And I don't know what his contract actually looks like. So that's the hardest part for me. I don't know if there's a resolution other than getting him on TV in AEW or getting him out of his contract so that he can go elsewhere. But I don't know when that's going to happen or what's going to happen. It's just kind of hard to watch because I'm a huge fan of Ricky Starks as a talent. So yeah, man, that's a tough one for me to break down. I don't really have a strong opinion on any part of it because it's just a sticky situation, for lack of a better way to put it.
I've said this for quite a while now, and this is very much a thing at WWE as well, because they're guilty of it at times. But I just find it absolutely shocking that these wrestlers don't have an exit clause in their contracts, where if they are not used for X amount of time, let's say 3 months, without reason,
You
right,
would
they're
like
not
to
hurt.
think.
Yeah, nothing like that. Why on earth isn't that a clause in their contract?
Now, at the same time, although writing in one of those would probably reduce the financial side of the contract in a negotiation. This is hypothetical.
It would, unless it was the industry norm. You are right if somebody tried to argue,
Yeah,
ask that specifically, but the fact that
yeah,
it's not, the fact that the top names in the industry haven't said, hey, this is what should be done, let's collectively say together it's going to happen. But of course, we've seen in wrestling history
and
when that starts to happen, it
I'm
fails.
wondering how incentives based some of these contracts are, because in sports generally you're going to see a lot of incentive based contracts. I think that would be, I have a hard time imagining a wrestler signing for an incentive base that isn't merch related, because you're at the mercy of being booked.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't know how many incentives you can write into one of those contracts. That's another part for me. I'm not 100% sure. I wish I had more expertise in that. Right, I'm aware of kind of what's going on with the independent contractor situation and
Yeah,
and
I mean,
how
that's
all of
the
that
big
works.
part.
But
It's the fact that it's independent
yeah,
contractors. It makes it very, very difficult for anything like this to be written in.
yeah,
Because,
it's just tough. It makes it tougher from a negotiation standpoint, and that's it's a sticky situation to say the least. It's sticky Ricky right now.
Sticky Ricky Starks. Well, yeah, it's not a good situation for him at all. It really does suck. I mean, Anthony, what's your perspective on all of this?
This is a very tricky situation, like you guys have been saying, because we're only getting one side. And I'm not saying Ricky's not telling the full story, but there's always two sides to every story. I do find it very interesting that people that were tight with Cody and people that were tight with Punk, meaning Ricky, Danhausen, they're kind of blacklisted. And I don't understand why. From the Danhausen perspective, merchandise wise, why wouldn't you be using them? But as far as the Ricky Starks thing, I don't think it's the Effie thing. I mean, it may have played a role in it, but quite frankly, I don't think Effie is on anybody's radar that really matters. That would be going, that's it, the whole thing's done. Like, I don't think so. I think Ricky's being blunt and honest. He goes, I don't know why I'm not getting used. It does not make AEW look good in any of the situation. Now, whether or not they're offering him stuff and he's turning it down, that's the thing we don't know in that whole situation. But to me, it makes no sense. You're paying this guy under contract for what, the past 6 months? I could be wrong, give or take a month or two, that he has not been on TV. He's got another 6 months if he's going into the summer under contract. You are literally going to pay this man to sit at home. You're not hurting him, you're hurting yourself. It's wasted money. You could put him on TV and put other people over. I get he doesn't want to be there, but you're paying for it anyway. So use him to put your actual talent over. And then if he refuses, then you got to breach a contract. Right now, you look like a fool paying this man to sit at home for no reason. It just doesn't make any logical sense why you be wasting a talent of Ricky's caliber by not putting other talent over. If he wants to leave, that's fine. But while you have him, use him to put other people over that want to stay. It doesn't make any sense. Or just cut him loose and save the money. Make a decision, because right now it does not look like AEW's in the best light, and they struggle with this constantly. WWE got buried for this with Bray Wyatt when they wouldn't release him. Then when WWE released him, everyone, hey, what'd you release him for? Again, you're gonna deal with this. So either cut it or use them to put other people over, or figure something out with them and make it an angle and make money off of it. But
yeah,
they failed with the Punk one. Are you gonna fail again with Ricky?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a good look as well, where every time, talent, the top talent leaves AEW, if they go and end up saying bad things about them afterwards, about their time there, it's going to hurt AEW's reputation. And it really sucks, because it very much seems like the top stars in AEW all love it there. Mercedes Moné just did an interview where she said today she's having the time of her life in All Elite Wrestling. But then when you've got people leaving and saying the opposite, I mean, the grass is always green on the other side, as they say, you know, that mentality. But
Well,
even still, they need to try and stop their former talents talking so negatively, and
Yeah.
keeping them under contract doesn't help.
here's the thing: if you're up in the higher tier card, making a lot more money than a lot of the other talent, and you're getting pushed, of course you're going to love it there. But if you're on the bottom,
the happiest
and you're
player on the team is usually the superstar.
yeah, I
right?
mean, this
Yeah,
is
it's
why
true. That's
this
true.
is
they
why
get the ball the most.
This is why, and Jesse Ventura talked about this when he tried to unionize. You're
Yeah.
not going to get it when the bigger star in Hogan isn't going to go along with it. That's why the union and why that stuff's never going to work in wrestling, because multiple generations, because everyone's out for themselves as a whole in the bigger names. You're not going to see Roman on a picket line. You're not going to see MJF on a picket line. They're getting paid. They're not going to stand up for these people. So it's
also really interesting to me, guys, and I thought about this the other day. So there's a lot of, like, with what's going on with AEW right now and WWE, comparisons to WCW, right?
Yep.
But during that era, a lot of the I didn't like that place or we don't like that place played out on screen,
Correct.
and there wasn't this layer of off-screen film that we have in the modern era. And obviously it's a sign of the times. It's a different era, and I'm not saying one is better than the other. It's just different, right? You would see X-Pac drop the cut the mustard line and knocked his experience in WCW on TV. It's not right, not in an interview, not in a promo.
I agree with you, Clark. Both companies back then, they would capitalize on that, both on TV and in their official magazines. Now they don't. You could be making money with this Ricky angle, but you're not. Like, you know what I mean?
My point is that I think it's also different because at the time there was no Chris Van Vliet to go on and air your grievances.
Yeah.
So that was either going to happen on TV in the other company,
or on radio,
or somehow it became an angle or a radio clip that got out. Somehow there was not really viral clips like that. It really does change the dynamic when it comes to, and because Ben, you'd mentioned, right, it goes both ways. I'm having the best time of my life here. I hated it there, right? It goes both ways. So you're getting, there's an influx of information in a way that there wasn't in the past. And that's why I'm almost like processing as it happens, because I'm not sure which to focus on and which not to, because I agree with Anthony. If they could somehow turn this into an angle, now we're really talking. But here's the interesting part. So if all of a sudden, let's say hypothetically, this thing goes all the way to the end and Ricky's contract just expires, will we not be disappointed if it turns into an angle on the WWE side? Probably. We would be disappointed if it does. We're not asking for that. We'd actually like it to be an angle in AEW while he's still there. And that's the funny part, because back in the day, it was you flip sides and the angle happens in the other promotion. And that's kind of the point that I'm making. You see what I mean?
Here's the thing. Here's the thing we don't know. Obviously, Ricky was in Jersey for the GCW thing, obviously the same location as Full Gear. We don't know if he was backstage. Maybe Tony Khan did see the Effie interview and went, you know what? We're going to screw GCW. We're turning this into an angle, and that's going to be a part of it, and have Ricky pop up on TV. Because at the end of the day, AEW is going to be about AEW, because, again, that's the bottom line. That's what any wrestling company, they're going to look out for themselves. So if they could turn this into an angle and make money on it, that's great. I don't know if it is right now, but all indications are Ricky doesn't seem happy from every end. And this was even prior to this.
Yeah, heck if I got to stand up to the Death Riders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean,
this is your fault.
If they manage to turn it into an angle, that is absolutely brilliant. There is zero doubt about that. But my point on this situation really comes down to, if you're just not going to use someone and they want out of their contract, I think you should just let them out. Now, if you want to use them in a certain way and they're like, that's not happening, then by all means keep them under contract or fire them, whichever's better for you personally as a company, because it's on them. But when the performer wants to perform, they're in their prime and you're just not using them. I think it's ridiculous.
That's an old mentality of you keeping them off TV and hurting their brand.
Yeah.
Now, granted, in this situation, it's not going to work.
No.
Because
But it is an
make
old
them
school
look bad.
mentality.
Yes,
That's what you would see with if you had an issue with talent. That's what you would often see.
you'd have them
like, you
lose,
basically
you have
just-
them lose, and then they'd be off TV for 3 months or whatever it
You
is.
just hold them.
Yep.
Basically, like
Yeah.
Kenny Rogers, you got to know when to hold them. You got to know when to fold them. Know when to walk
DCX
away.
Warlord says, just release Ricky Starks. I mean, if you're not got plans, I completely agree. Coby says, the
Know
grass
when
is
to
always
run.
greener on the other side. We've seen this time and time again in both companies. You think you'll be better off in the other company. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes is, sometimes isn't. DCX Warlord says, Dakota Kai for Women's IC Champion. We'll get onto that later on tonight. And Coby said that Ricky Starks was there at Full Gear. There's a photo with him. Hopefully they are doing something. Hopefully he wasn't just there and there wasn't anything to talk about. Who knows? But they need to do something. They absolutely do. But they also need to do something about this WWE ID thing, because I want to talk about this for a second, right? I really don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this. I think AEW right now are facing a real problem in 5 to 10 years unless they come up with a solution to WWE ID. Because we know pretty much a vast majority of the top young stars on the independent scene right now have been signed to these WWE ID contracts. And WWE want to do multiple classes of these each year. In the first class, there's been like 20. So if we're going to see this multiple times a year, what's that going to be, 50, 60 names? I mean, pretty much any wrestler of any talent who comes through a training school is getting signed. So bang, there we are. It's going to be harder for AEW to get talent. They don't have a PC. They don't have a training school. But then they are also currently making enemies, whether they clearly feel like it's the fault of GCW, but they are clearly making enemies with GCW right now. And so WWE could make a partnership there. Other companies, they've not been letting their wrestlers do as many indie dates over the past 12 months as well. So their relationships with a lot of independent promotions aren't as good as they once were. And right at the start of the company, the Young Bucks said that they were going to use the independent scene as their developmental system. Well, it's hard to say that's the case now because they're losing that relationship with the independent scene, but they also don't have their own training school, their own performance center. And I think this is an issue which could very easily be solved, or at least be solved for the most part. And I think the way you do that is you open up a few training schools around the country and do, all elite training schools or something like that, right? And sure, it's a little bit expensive at the start, but for the long term, of your company, I think it's necessary. Because otherwise, I think you're going to end up in a situation where you are only going to get WWE rejects. And sure, there's going to be a lot of those. That is true, right? No way can they actually sign 60 talents a year, right? Maybe 10 will be signed. But these WWID deals, we don't know how long they are. We know they're multi-year. So it means during that time, AEW can't sign them. So they're going to be getting these talents instead of when they're 21, 22, when they're 25, 26, maybe a little bit older. And that does matter. That's 3 years you could have used them for, established them, or anything like that. So in my opinion, I really do think AEW need an answer to this. Whether it's AEW ID like Dustin Rhodes suggests, or whether it's a training school. But Clark, I want to get your thoughts on this one.
I wholeheartedly disagree. And it's funny because I agree with you on a lot of the WWE ID stuff. But I don't think it affects AEW negatively in the way that you've just presented there. I think it deeply affects the independent schools and how they get talent. And we'll see how that works. The schools that aren't in the program, the schools that aren't training wrestlers in the program, but there will always be talent every
just
year.
To clarify, they are
just
signing
like
names which aren't in the schools.
Just like Monday. Just like Monday, every year there's a new class of athletes. Just like you got a year older, there's another new class every single year. We saw WCW, just like in the last segment, I brought them up with the power plant, years ahead of its time, right? Just like WWID. We got Goldberg, we got DDP, we got all kinds of wrestlers trained inside of the power plant only and directly debuting in WCW. It's an underlooked aspect of WCW success. There were good stars that came out of the power plant. Was it like a gigantic factor in WWE being able to find talent? No. It wasn't on the scale of WWE ID? No. But at the same time, I don't think AEW needs to be in the business of developing 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds. That would actually make even less sense than keeping Ricky Starks off TV. Why would you invest all of this money in developing your own talent when there's an endless pool? There's already a giant society of wrestling schools around the country that provide different stylistic coaching, provide different styles, coach to different regions, and do all of that. Why would you now want to have your hands on that and spend all of the money yourself to handle that when there's a system in place as is? Sure, WWID is maybe commandeering a part of the wrestling training facilities, a part of those schools, some independent dates and whatnot. That doesn't mean they're all going to go away. Does it hurt anybody? Yes, it hurts independent promotions and it hurts independent schools that aren't tied to it in certain ways. But it doesn't mean they're completely gone. It doesn't mean they'll completely go away. Santino Bros in LA isn't going anywhere. There is talent all over the world, not to mention the New Japan Dojo may not be right there with WWID. There will still be great wrestlers coming out of the New Japan Dojo. There will still be great wrestlers coming out of Mexico, out of Canada, out of various schools. Yes, the WWE is going to sign pure athletes and big time prospects on the young side, and that's smart from their perspective. But for AEW to try to match it, I think would be a gigantic mistake. I think this is the classic situation where when somebody zigs, you got to zag. You got to figure out the holes left and figure out how to utilize that in order to remain successful. And I think AEW is very much capable of that because they have the money to compete financially when it comes to established free agents. And established stars will always be the lifeblood of the industry at the top.
Right. So, a couple of things on this point. Firstly, to clarify, WWE have already, we kind of misunderstood, I think, the ID thing at the start, where we presumed they were signing talents from those training schools. That's not what's happening. They are signing talents from across the world. Right now, they said they're starting with the US, but then it will be the world.
Right.
From the variety of training schools, there's the
That's
top
fine.
stars, right?
Mhm.
Any training school, top stars that they think are prospects. But what they are doing is they are then having them train in those training schools, which they named. So originally we thought they were taking talents from those training schools.
No, it's not. No. That's not ever what I thought. What I thought is that the WWID schools are going to be the key ones because I thought that they would put their stamp on it even then. So the WWID kid isn't going to get shoved around harder in training. I don't know if that strategy pays off in the long run either.
Well, no, I mean, we know our thoughts on WWID, but the second point I want to make is where I really disagree with you. I think people exaggerate too much at times at AEW signing WWE stars. They do, right? Because they've got plenty of homegrown ones as well. But if they are exclusively signing failed WWID prospects, former WWE stars, even if they're big names,
is your assumption though that only ID prospects will rise to the top? Is that your assumption that only the ID prospects will rise? Yes,
I think they're going to, not only, but I think 95%
that is a broad stroke there, man.
If they're signing 60 names a year, right? I'm going to be honest with you. There's not, there's hundreds training a year, but there's not more than 60 good wrestlers coming through schools a year.
You're assuming all 60 are going to make it. You know how many people WWE signs in a given year that don't make it?
I mean, Gable Steveson went
back to I said I think 10 will make it max, right?
I
mean, make it to NXT even. Let's just make it to NXT.
Here's the side thing.
2-3 year deals.
Here's the thing. As far as AEW doing that to do a replica thing, it would obviously take a lot of money to do it, especially if you're doing it all over. Also, you need the personnel to run it. Financially and logistically, it makes no sense. WWE didn't go out on their own. There's no way partnering up with existing schools. I get you want to try to get this talent, but you need the infrastructure to do it. So you can't just go, oh, here's $5 million, build me a school, and
No,
you
I
can
don't.
run it.
To clarify, the AEW ID and the training school thing is in the performance center are two different, solutions. Dustin
but-
Rhodes says it's critical that they need to do an AEW ID. I'm saying, maybe performance centers instead. I'm not saying that, they need to train all the talent from scratch, but at
If
least if you
ID
have an
just
avenue
becomes-
to train them, that's a way you can do it. WWE are doing both. They're training people from scratch and signing these kids, right? And it's right. AEW can't compete financially, but I think they are going to have to spend a bit to save a lot long term.
If ID it becomes just having exclusive contract rights, it's really just going to change negotiation from top to bottom. So if it becomes all of a sudden you're labeled as an AEW ID wrestler and a WWE ID wrestler, and you're on the independent scene, it complicates booking for the independent
because
promotions,
this guy
It
can't
will
go over
do
that guy.
It will do
a
that,
huge
yeah.
issue. And same thing with even the schools, because now all of a sudden you have somebody signed to a rival school. Can you actually trust them in the ring, especially in something as dangerous as what we watch, which is pro wrestling? Can you actually trust that? If that domino effect, and I don't see the need for it. I do hear Dustin maybe on like a base school, a training center, a spot where you can take your
which is
already
what I'm
signed
suggesting.
prospects.
That's the one which I think's better idea than an ID thing, which is what
that's
he's
possible. If it starts being like we just put our name on a prospect and we'll see how they turn out.
That's why I'm saying that shouldn't happen.
Which is that's what WWE.
I'm for a training school.
A training school would be fair. I think they should do no beginners. I think you show up at the AEW training school to get ready to show up on AEW television.
At the end of the day, the industry always self-corrects. It'll work itself out. The industry always does this.
Well, I mean, it does, but we had WWE being, pretty much the soul.
20 years.
Pretty much nobody competing against
I
them
understand,
for a
but other companies started up. Other wrestlers found ways that weren't under the WWE radar.
Yeah,
the industry always corrects itself.
AJ Styles, by the way, AJ Styles is the perfect
example. None of them were earning much money.
AJ Styles,
right?
yeah,
AJ Styles is the perfect example.
Yes.
I want to talk about this comment from Shard, right, naming these wrestlers. Carl Fletcher, he obviously started off in Australia, so that could be somewhere they signed him, but then he went to New Japan. New Japan is now struggling financially. They're struggling to offer these contracts to young stars, which is why you're not seeing international stars in the dojo much anymore.
Where's Ospreay? Where's Okada? They're not in WWE.
No, but that's after the fact.
What about John
the last
Moxley?
18 months.
Yeah.
The New Japan dojo is, they've got a few stars coming out. We've obviously seen Gabe Kidd and all them, but they're actually struggling to bring in international names post-pandemic because they're struggling financially. Then as for Daniel Garcia, his training school is now linked to WWE ID, so who knows if he would have, come through that way. And same with Willow. Mariah May, that's an exception. That's again in the UK. But if they do this internationally, this is when, guys, I'm saying it, right? If they don't have a solution to this, we'll have to wait 5 to 10 years. But I'd be very, very, very worried, right? And it's not an argument which I'll win today.
I'm not.
But I'm really worried in 5 to 10 years, unless they have a solution, which I think they're going to have. I think they have to.
Much bigger problems than that.
Yeah,
for AEW, that is.
Yes,
the independents and some
including
schools
the next one we're going to be covering.
Yeah,
so.
That's a perfect transition. Right, so talking about great AEW decisions. They basically said, hey, we're going to do a big stadium show in Australia, 60,000 fans, big spectacle in a market which WWE have struggled like hell to sell in the last couple of years when they've tried to run it. Well, AEW decided they were going to run an event, and who did they send over to promote it? Who did they send over to do the press tour? They sent Toni Storm and Paul White. And Toni Storm spent the press tour saying how she wasn't going to be competing because she has now retired. Meanwhile, Paul White was talking about how he's probably retired. So you've got these two superstars wrestlers going around Australia promoting the event, one in kayfabe, one not, saying that they're probably retired. And you expect people who don't know about what AEW is to be like, I should buy a ticket to this. I mean, listen, like I said, it's a really, really hard market to sell. WWE have struggled like hell. And hey, I'm sure in this new 13,000 seat arena, which AEW Grand Slam Australia has now moved to from the 60,000 seat original plan. I'm sure it's going to look great there, and I'm sure they're going to pack it out. I think it's going to be a great show. But the fact that they thought that they could sell out 60,000 seats and thought that the two people to sell the event were Paul White and Tony Storm, both talking about how they're retired, it infuriated me. Anthony, what's your take on this?
It obviously was not the most logical decision to say that you're probably not competing on the show and the other one's retired. I respect the ambition on doing it. It's the same way when they did All In Wembley. You're ambitious to do it. However, they're struggling everywhere they go. Outside of Chicago and Vegas, they struggle for the most part. And that, to me, is their bigger concern than any WWE ID stuff. Their ratings and their attendance are pretty much in the toilet. And it's showing no sign of reversing course. My question with the people that bought tickets for this show, expecting 60,000, did part of them buy it because they thought they were going to be a part of a 60,000 thing, and now it's 13,000? Are they going to flip the tickets? It's a difficult thing to do. I know I got a lot of flack when I talked about TNA. This was maybe about a year ago or whatever like that. And this was before it really kind of turned it around. And they're like, why are they running smaller buildings? I said, because a sold out smaller building visually looks better than a lot of empty seats. Also, you could say it was a sellout. And technically you're right. AEW needs to go to smaller buildings. And that's both internationally and in the States. You sell what you can sell. When you get a demand that's greater than what the building's capacity is, you could always move and go to a bigger building. So yeah, it doesn't surprise me. It's disappointing for them. I feel bad for the talent that really wanted to show out on this show, thinking they're going to perform in front of 60,000 people, and they're not. They just don't have the demand for it. And that's the root of their problem. The root of their problem is booking and to get eyes on the product. It's not, the young talent of getting WWE ID stuff. They got plenty of talent. It's using said talent and getting the audience to care. And that's where they're struggling with. This should be a wake-up call to them to go, we have a serious issue we need to take care of, but everyone pretends like everything is fine. Meanwhile, the building's on fire. So you really need to wise up.
Everything is fine. Dang it.
I agree with you, Anthony, on a lot of that. But it's also, back to the TNA thing you said about, looking better. It comes down to AEW have a bit of a perception problem, right? People view them in a certain light. And I don't think Tony Khan really takes it seriously when that is something to take seriously. If you are seeing arenas which are half full, you're seeing these photos, people think that product must suck, right? And in reality, they sold like 8,000 seats a week, whatever, right? They still sell, there's a lot of people are interested in the product, but you're seeing half empty arenas. It hurts it. It truly, truly does. And that, again, that comes back to the thing earlier where I think if they sign all former WWE names, that's where, again, it hurts them perception-wise. But I don't know. I'm worried about All in Texas. That's my biggest worry.
No, I don't think that'll be a problem. Texas is a very hot wrestling location.
I'll go and save the show. I'll buy the last ticket.
I hope
if it
so.
comes down to one.
If they sell that out, right, or not even sell it out, if they make it lock full, right, then at that point, everybody who says to them they can only sell tickets in the UK, they can be like, well, actually, no. We sold out a stadium in the US, and that can help their perception problem significantly.
I think that's another thing that hurts them too, where they do the same pay-per-views in the same location every year. Because, it
so
kind of
you're like, I went last year, am I going to do it again? That's a great point.
There needs to be a hype. There's a reason why WWE doesn't do the same location every year. It's to build the hype. Hey, we're getting All In. Now, listen, All Out, I get Chicago. That's kind of a special thing because the origin of the original All In started there. That's the foundation. I get that. But you kind of need to start doing these pay-per-views in other places. Like, I could tell you for a perfect example, as hot as Philly is as a wrestling town, AEW has never had a pay-per-view here. The only one they ever had
is
here
fascinating, by the way. I didn't think about that.
Was Final Battle. And that was only because it was in Philly.
That's right.
So, you know,
Yeah. I don't know. It's not looking. I don't know. At the same time, I do agree with Clark your perspective on this a lot of time. That tradition is, something, and that's what Tony Khan always says, and I understand that. But at the same time, people said at Wembley last year they don't think they could afford it every single year, and that's why they said, "Hey,
no, that
what
makes
we're going to
sense.
do is every other year instead." And I think that
So
works a lot better.
that's the one thing I thought is interesting about All Out, and obviously Coby had his little "they're struggling in Chicago" thing too. Like you've ever been there, Coby? But
They are struggling in Chicago. In fact,
no,
that's
but
actually their
here's the
lowest, the
thing.
biggest decline.
There's Now Arena. There's multiple venues. There's the Rosemont that they're probably not going to run. That's the WWE building. They obviously ran United Center one year. It was pretty good in United Center. That was one of the most fun years that I've been to, and there was a lot of funk because that was coming 1 week after All In. Now I will say that the 2 years I attended at Now Arena, that's a horseshoe stadium. They can fill that just fine. It was filled to the brim the first time I went in 2021. In 2022, it wasn't as filled. There was a few sections blocked off in the rafters by comparison to the previous year, but it was filled for the available seats. Now, there was also a bigger stage the second year, and I'm not making excuses. I'm just giving my observations. I was there for my birthday, so I was having fun. Let's be honest with ourselves. But either way, Now Arena was a great venue, and that's where the original All In was in Chicago, to Anthony's earlier point. And so that tradition, as long as they can get Now Arena pretty filled, which I think they can, it's literally
they struggled this year. They only just got, I think, half full in the end.
But still, even then, it didn't look empty. And the other thing is, now is a small venue that you can pack more people than should be in there in. And that's part of the lore of it. That's why it gets so loud. It's too small for how many people are in there. You're like on top of the ring. You know what I mean? So you have
There's
like
still videos of empty seats though.
No, I'm talking this year. But my point about the reason that you go to Now is when there is 11,000 in there, it's loud as could be.
The acoustics, the acoustics support like a much better building.
Yes.
Win Trust for tonight is under 4K right now. I mean, it's again like if you fit 4K people into a venue which holds 5K, it's going to look and sound great.
Win Trust isn't Win Trust the one on the south side?
It doesn't matter what side it's on. What it matters is it's not selling anywhere near the capacity. It doesn't matter the location. What matters it's not selling anywhere near it. Let me find out the capacity for a second, shall I? 11.
Or is
just
Now
under
Arena
11K.
Now Win Trust and I messed up? That's possible.
No,
they could have easily changed the name. I mean, they do that all the time.
Win Trust might be
the Win Trust Arena.
Where is it? Is it Hoffman Estates? Or is it in the South Loop?
It is in 200 East Cermak Road.
Yeah, so it's on the south side. It's a different arena. It's the capacity.
Well, this might be the south side. I don't know. It's right at the top of the north of Illinois. Maybe that's south side.
Oh, whoa! Win Trust then isn't in Chicago. That's somewhere else.
It's outside.
Where is it?
Oh God,
I'm so confused now.
It's in Chicago, Illinois. Chicago, Illinois.
Okay, then it's on the south side. Yeah, Chicago.
It's north of the highlighted area. It's right at the top. North.
How close is it to the lake?
It's on the lake.
Yeah, it's on the south side. Thank you. There we go.
Why on earth is you're the south side? I'm looking at a map. I don't understand it. But
it's the DePaul University's men's and women's basketball teams play there.
Oh, never mind. No, that is up on the north side because it's in the hundreds. I should have known that. It's 200.
And the WNBA Sky
it's a completely different arena than the one I was talking about, or the Rosemont or United Center. The capacity is going to be like in the 7s.
Right, let's quickly end the show then by saying who we think should be the inaugural Women's IC Champion. Of course, it was introduced this week before Raw. It's going to be a Raw exclusive title, presumably. My personal pick, I'm saying Dakota Kai. That is who I want to win this belt first. What about you, Anthony?
Lyra would be my pick.
Oh, that is a solid one, no doubt about it. I mean, not been utilized too much on the main roster so far, but when she has looked good. What about you, Clark?
Okay, I can't lie. I was gonna go with Lyra, but for continuity, I'm gonna say
Sorry,
Jade
Clark.
Cargill. I'm gonna say Jade Cargill.
She's on Raw. She's on SmackDown. Sorry.
I know.
Also, she went through a windshield.
She's
I
out
think
for
we have a
long
recovery,
time.
and she shows up and does it. I was
Come
gonna
on,
go with
another
Lyra.
name,
Lyra?
another
Oh,
name.
Shoot,
Give us a
Lyra is my pick. Is the hardest part.
Okay,
I'm like,
Lyra, go
I'm
Lyra.
going with Lyra Valkyria. Like that's who I was picking. Like that. I was all excited to be like, I'm gonna take Lyra. I think I might be the only one. Then Anthony's
And
like,
you forgot
Lyra.
I was on it. If Josh
Dang
was
it.
here, he wouldn't have picked him.
Dang it. Like,
Shard is saying the Pirate Princess Kairi Sane should win the IC title. Let's
That would
make
be
people
cool.
remember how amazing she is. Great shout.
I do love her though in the tag division with either Asuka or Io Sky though
Yeah, she's
too
a
at the
great
same
tag
time. It's
wrestler.
like I don't know. But I do like that call. It's a good call. But yeah, Lyra was my pick the whole way.
Numero 1 says Dakota, Zelina, or Natalia. I mean, Natalia's a veteran you could give it to, but I don't think she needs it. But you could.
I would lob Zelina into that conversation.
Yeah, no doubt about it. A lot of great options. I'm very excited for both of these belts. I really, really am. Hopefully it means the women's divisions get more time because, I mean, we've just named some other talent. It's stacked. But that does bring us to the end of the show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Anthony. Thank you to Clark for joining me here today. We will be back. Same time, no, it won't be same time.
No.
It will be a different time tomorrow because we're going to have a little Thanksgiving special on our hands. Clark, what time is it tomorrow?
So it's gonna be at 8 a.m. Pacific, which will be 11 East. That's gonna be 5 a.m. in Hawaii, and then it's gonna be 8 hours after whatever 8 a.m. is Pacific. That's like 4.
So yeah,
4
4
your
p.m.
time.
UK time.
How about that? Quick
an early
brain
one.
math. Brain math.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be in the chiropractors during that, getting my my back sorted out. But I will watch it after the fact for sure. Make sure you guys tune in live. I hope to see you guys tomorrow, and I hope you Americans have a great Thanksgiving. And make sure you spend your morning watching WR Daily, where we talk tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite. See you guys then.